People are like, oh, that's a psyop. If it's a psyop, it started with Moses, not the CIA. Genesis chapter 1. I even go even further back, go back to Job. Many people believe Job predates Genesis. Job had the same idea. Read Job 38. Okay, modern cosmology. Now, one of the things I hear all the time, is, Rob, you're making Christians look stupid. Okay, I'm going to address that tomorrow in quite a bit of detail, this whole idea that I'm making Christians look stupid. Let's look at what the other side believes.
What would you say to some of the parents who are like, look, you know, we're going to go ahead, we'll learn about evolution, but we also believe in creationism. What is the harm in learning the Bible's creation story?
Well, learning the story is fine. I mean, that's great, but it's not science. And tax dollars used for science education shouldn't be used to teach creationism as an alternative. Creationism is not right.
The notion of creationism, or in fact, look, Senator Marco Rubio, who's presumably a reasonably intelligent man, was asked, what's the age of the earth? And ultimately, either because he actually believed it or he was trying to appeal to some constituency, had to argue that it's a big mystery, that somehow we should teach kids both ideas that the earth is 6,000 years old and that it's 4.55 billion years old, which is what it is. If you think about that, somehow saying that, well, anything goes, we shouldn't offend religious beliefs by requiring kids to to understand reality. That's child abuse.
It sounds very laudable to teach the controversy, to teach both theories, but there aren't two theories. There's only one theory around. There's only one game in town as far as serious science is concerned. Of course, you get negative reactions from creationists, but who cares about creationists? They don't know anything.
How many of you have heard that, according to the theory of evolution, we share about 98% of our genetic makeup with chimpanzees? Have you heard that in school? Have you ever heard how they came to that number? 98%? We've all just heard it, right? We share 98% of our genome with chimps. Okay, the video I'm about to show you is not from a Kent Hovind or a creationist. It's from somebody who believes in evolution, somebody who believes we came from chimpanzees, but actually acknowledging how we got the 98%. Check this out.
When researchers sat down to compare the chimp and human genomes, those single-letter differences were easy to tally, but the big mismatch sections weren't. For example, if a genetic paragraph, thousands of letters long, appears twice in a human scroll, but only once in its chimp counterpart, should that second human copy count as thousands of changes, or just one? And what about identical paragraphs that appear in both genomes, but in different places, or in reverse order, or broken up into pieces? Rather than monkey around with these difficult questions, the researchers simply excluded all the large mismatch sections, a whopping 1.3 billion letters in all, and performed a letter-by-letter comparison on the remaining 2.4 billion, which turned out to be 98.77% identical. So, yes, we share 99% of our DNA with chimps if we ignore 18% of their genome and 25% of ours.
But that's what passes for science. Does that sound completely absurd to you? Oh yeah, we just, 4 billion letters, let's throw those out. Hey, we're 98% the same. What? That's insane. But that's in college level science books being passed off as fact. This is not science. All right, this is the natural result of the depravity that comes from ignoring the Word of God, and it's the byproduct of hating God.
You have written that God is a psychotic delinquent invented by mad, deluded people.
No, I didn't say quite that. I said something rather better than that.
Oh, well, please tell us what you said. Please tell us what you said.
Well, I would have to read it from the book.
No, please.
The God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all fiction. Jealous and proud of it, a petty, unjust, unforgiving control freak, a vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully.
So that's what you think of God?
Yeah.
He's like primary atheist of the world. And so if you're going to talk about science and religion, you need people like that to find out where are they thinking, where are they taking us, what's it all about. But we couldn't just feature Richard Dawkins. We need some other views here. And so we combed the landscape. And we found a Jesuit priest. This is the academic order of the Catholic Church. And we have with us Father Martin. Welcome to Star Talk.
Thank you very much.
All right. You, as a modern Catholic, have no problem with evolution.
Correct.
Correct. I can't say the same about other theologians who walk this earth. So what does that mean?
It means that
in the world, in politics, in all of this.
Sure. Well, it means that different Christians have different viewpoints on that. I'm a firm believer in evolution. There are some people who don't believe it. I'm not sure how you can't be convinced if you see the kind of archaeology and the sort of the kind of history of the world. But there they are. So I can't account for ignorance.
Okay, so not to put words in your mouth,
Sure.
but what you might be saying here in this conversation is that for religion to go forward and not be in conflict with science, it needs to embrace what science finds about the natural world and not jump in the face of the scientists and say, that conflicts with my interpretation of Scripture, therefore you must be wrong.
No, I agree. And I think most religious scientists, I'm not a religious scientist, would say that and would say, this
Yes,
is
they
helping,
would, by the way.
Yeah,
Yes.
This is helping me
The ones I know.
understand. Yeah, this is helping me understand God's beautiful world. And I think what happens sometimes is, religion gets caricatured. So obviously, if you're religious, you must not believe in evolution, which I think is
Most
false.
Well, it's certainly true for some. You're saying it's not true for all.
I'd say for a few.
When we come back, we're going to find out if you have to give up your religion to believe in evolution. Clearly, the good father here doesn't. But how about others? When Star Talk continues. So one of the great questions out there is how do we get more religions or more people who are religious on board with the moving frontier of science? Recognizing that you don't have to give up your religion unless perhaps your religion requires that there was no evolution. If it requires it, maybe you got to sort of lose it. But
that's probably pretty few religions, right?
I would
That's
think so.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, right? I mean,
well, I hope so. I don't understand people who can't believe in evolution. I don't understand people who don't look at, the sort of carbon dating and things like that in fossils. I can't understand it. And I have a hard time understanding why people cannot accept the fact that God can work through evolution, that it's just as much of a miracle of creation if it takes 10 million years or 15 million years as if it took 7 days. So I don't understand that. We shouldn't say religious people think this or religious people think that, because it is a label that is applied to people and often applied to make them seem uneducated, insane, or just idiots. And as if you have to check your brain at the door.
Consider again that pale blue dot we've been talking about. Imagine that you take a good long look at it. Imagine you're staring at the dot for any length of time. And then try to convince yourself that God created the whole universe for one of the 10 million or so species of life that inhabit that speck of dust. Man, in his arrogance, thinks himself a great work, worthy of the interposition of a deity. Darwin wrote telegraphically in his notebook, more humble, and I think truer, to consider him created from animals. Close quote. We're Johnny-come-latelys. We live in the cosmic boondocks. We emerged from microbes and muck. Apes are our cousins.
You don't believe that the Earth is round only if you're an astronaut. You don't believe Napoleon existed only if you're a historian. You believe these things because they're facts proved by evidence. Evolution is also a demonstrated fact. The truth really is out there. It's not a matter of opinion.
So you believe it's liberating to tell people that there is no God?
I think a lot of people, when they give up God, feel a great sense of release and freedom.
Well, then who did create the heavens and the earth?
Why do you use the word who? You see, you immediately beg the question by using the word who.
Well, then how did it get created?
Well, by a very slow process.
Well, how did it start?
Nobody knows how it started. We know the kind of event that it must have been. We know the sort of event that must have happened for the origin of life.
And what was that?
It was the origin of the first self-replicating molecule.
Right, and how did that happen?
I told you we don't know.
So you have no idea how it started?
No, nor has anybody.
Nor has anyone else.
I'm a synthetic organic chemist. Origin of life is purely synthetic organic chemistry. There's no way around it. I'm perfectly situated to be commenting on this, to be critiquing the origin of life research. It is abiological. It is before biology takes over. This is purely synthetic organic chemistry. And making these compounds is very simple. 4 classes of compounds. You have to make them from what's available on a presumed prebiotic earth. And so the chemistry is not hard for a synthetic organic chemist to follow, and any trained synthetic organic chemist can follow me on this. And I've never seen a synthetic organic chemist disagree with me on this. In fact, the people that might disagree with me are biologists because they've never made anything. The only thing they may have made is they buy a kit and they make it, which is made by chemists, but they've never made anything ab initio. And so it's the synthetic chemist that can critique origin of life research better than anyone else. So go ahead, ask your synthetic chemist friends to listen to what I have to say. If they have anywhere a master's degree or beyond in synthetic organic chemistry, have them critique what I say. We do not know how to build even a simple bacterium. The simplest bacterium with its 256 protein coding genes, we have no idea how to build it. First of all, we don't know how to build the molecules, the 4 classes of molecules that are needed for it. We don't know how to, even if we had those 4 classes of molecules, assemble them even into the simplest of bacteriums. We don't know how to do that. One can do that with the technologies we have today. We can make technologies, but we can't even make the simplest bacterium. Anybody who would say something contrary does not know what they are talking about. Show me the demonstration. Nobody has ever done it. And it's not because of lack of effort. It's not because of lack of will. First of all, they haven't been able to get the molecules to do this. And if they could make the molecules, even if we were to give them the molecules, they wouldn't have the information. There would be no inherent information in the DNA. But even if we gave them the DNA in the structure that they wanted, they wouldn't know how to put all the components together because of the sophistication within a cell. The interactomes, meaning that the interacting connectivity between the molecules, the van der Waals interactions, all of these have to be in the right place and in the right order for a cell to function. We don't even know how to define life, let alone knowing how to spark it to begin. When one looks at a typical textbook, one will see some prehistoric pond and molecules, and those molecules coming together and forming a cell, and those cells coming together and some slithering creature coming out of this pond. That is fallacious. There is no truth in that. We don't even know how to make the molecules. We are lost on how to do this. We can't even make the basic building blocks. But even if we could, from prebiotic type environment to make these, with all the intellect that we put into this, even if we could make them, we have no idea how to assemble them. You say, well, we can make the liposome, the cell membrane. We cannot. There's over 40,000 lipids have been identified in cell membranes. You want to take some simple ones? It's not just individual lipid membranes. You have to have the inside and the outside of the membrane have to be different. You have to have this huge array of proteins, that transmembrane proteins, and you have to have carbohydrates on the surface as identifiers. Even in the simplest bacterium, we have no idea how to put the structure together. It's not there. So not only do we not know how to make the basic components, we do not know how to build the structure even if we were given the basic components. So the Gedanken experiment is this: even if I gave you all the components, even if I gave you all the amino acids, all the protein structures from those amino acids that you wanted, all the lipids in the purity that you wanted, the DNA, the RNA, even in the sequence that you wanted. So I'm even giving you the code. And so now I say, and all the nucleic acids. Can you now assemble a cell here in your individual bodies, not in your individual laboratories, not in a prebiotic cesspool, but in your nice laboratory? And the answer is a resounding no. And if anybody claims otherwise, they do not know this area. This is how far the misunderstanding has gone. Even science professors, even biology professors, think that there is a near building of life, that we understand all the ways to build life. We do not. Not only have none of the molecules been made ab initio under prebiotic-like conditions to make the homochiral molecules that are made. Remember, we need 4 classes of molecules. We need the nucleic acids, and then the homochiral systems that for the amino acids, which then need to be built up into protein structures. We need the carbohydrates, which have to be built up into the polycarbohydrate structures. And then we need the lipids, which also are chiral. All of these we need in homochiral form. We don't know how to do this in any prebiotic type scenario at all. These have not been made. And then to assemble these into a cell, it's never been done. So there's a gross misunderstanding. And this misunderstanding has come because of the projections of those who work in the area of origin of life. They do one little thing and then they extrapolate it, and then they work with the press to ramp it up even more, and they project as if they really know it. And so the layperson reads this and says, you see, scientists understand. And then it's not just the layperson. Scientists think that other scientists understand all of this, but they do not. So this is a cell. What is the origin of life? How do you get a cell like this? What is the origin of something like this? This is an amazing machine. A cell is an amazing machine. It's not just a blob of protoplasm. Every day it gets harder to have the origin of life, to come up with a scenario, because the origin of life becomes more and more complex every day. A cell is a factory. It has the lipid bilayer, which is extremely selective to let certain things in and not other things. It has all of this substructure in here, these little areas where energy is made in here. It has these microtubules which can form so you can move matter from point A to point B. If you go to a factory, what you see is these overhead hanging machines that are moving materials from point A to point B. In these systems. And the way they do this is they build these racks. But same thing happens in a cell. You get these microtubules to move material from point A to point B. And then as soon as the material is done moving, the microtubule breaks down and then assembles some other place. You say, well, why doesn't it leave it there? Because then the cell would become too rigid. So it just rebuilds it. It's just amazing factory what's happening in a cell. This is what we have to make. If we want to have origin of life, you got to start here. You don't start here. You start with a single cell. Just build a single cell. That's what we have to do in origin of life. Nobody has ever done this. If you've been taught that simple forms of life have been made, that is a lie that you are believing. Somebody told you a lie. That has never been done. Next slide. Organisms care about life. Molecules don't care. Chemistry, on the contrary, is utterly indifferent to life. Without a biologically derived entity acting upon them, molecules have never been shown to evolve toward life. Never. Molecules don't care about life. They don't know anything about moving toward life. They have no brain. Organisms want to move toward life and keep life going. Molecules don't care about life. Nobody has ever seen molecules assemble toward life. Never. It doesn't happen without a biological entity working on them. I asked all my colleagues, can you show me an example of this? Of molecules moving toward order, moving toward an ordered system where you have a non-regular assembly. Regular assembly is like A, or A, That you can get pure thermodynamic assembly. But non-ordered assembly is a non-regular pattern. That's what you have in DNA. We know from computer science you have to have non-regular patterns in order to have complexity for living systems. And I asked my colleagues, do you have any example of molecules without a biological entity acting upon them moving to give an ordered assembly that is a non-regular pattern. And they sent me papers where chemists have taken molecules and assembled them in that way. As a non-biological entity, you can't have a human doing this. Molecules don't move toward life. Well, even if you want to have molecules move toward life and you have human beings working upon them, can the human beings do it? And the answer is no. Next slide. So almost every chemical synthesis experiment in origin of life research can be summed up by a protocol analogous to this. They purchase chemicals, generally in high purity, from a chemical company. All right, so that's what they do. They first purchase the chemicals. They mix those chemicals together in water in high concentrations in a specific order under some set of carefully devised conditions in a modern lab. Then they can obtain a mixture of compounds that have a resemblance to one or more of the basic 4 classes of chemicals needed for life. So what you need for life is you need carbohydrates, nucleic acids, amino acids, and lipids. That's what we know. All life we know composes those 4 building blocks. So they try to make those 4 building blocks. Then they publish a paper making bold assertions about origin of life from these functionless crude mixtures of stereochemically scrambled intermediates, much like Miller did in 1952. Nothing has changed in 66 years. Nothing. Nothing's changed. Exactly where we were in 1952 is exactly where we have remained. Think about what's been done in science in the past 60 years. Think about how we have now satellite connectivity. Remember, in 1952, there had never been a satellite. Now we have satellite connectivity. We have cell phones. We have structure of DNA. We can manipulate DNA structure. Nothing has changed in origin of life studies in 66 years. That's important to realize. Then you engage with the ever gullible press to dial up the knob of unjustified extrapolations. Watch the mesmerized layperson exclaim, "You see, scientists understand how life formed." Then you encourage a generation of science textbook writers to make colorful, deceptive cartoons of raw chemicals assembling from cells which then emerge as slithering creatures from a prehistoric pond. That is exactly what is done every one of their experiments.
Evolution is a fact. It's documented by science.
Right, how did that happen?
I told you we don't know. Believe these things because they're facts proved by evidence. Evolution is also a demonstrated fact.
So you have no idea how it started?
No, nor has anybody.
Nor has anyone else. What do you think is the possibility that intelligent design might turn out to be the answer to some issues in genetics or in evolution?
It could come about in the following way. It could be that at some earlier time, somewhere in the universe, a civilization evolved by probably some kind of Darwinian means to a very, very high level of technology and designed a form of life that they seeded onto perhaps this planet. Now, that is a possibility and an intriguing possibility. And I suppose it's possible that you might find evidence for that if you look at the details of biochemistry, molecular biology. You might find a signature of some sort of designer.
Wait a second. Richard Dawkins thought intelligent design might be a legitimate pursuit?
And that designer could well be a higher intelligence from elsewhere in the universe. Well, but that higher intelligence would itself have had to have come about by some explicable or ultimately explicable process. It couldn't have just jumped into existence spontaneously. That's the point.
So Professor Dawkins was not against intelligent design, just certain types of designers, such as God.
Many people are extremely illogical.
Of course, and this is where Ancient Aliens enters the picture. Coming from an academic like Richard Dawkins. He's like the main spokesperson for evolution these days. Which means if that's the main view of evolution, that's what's making it into the textbooks. And of course, that's what we are being indoctrinated with on a regular basis on primetime television. You know, Ancient Aliens is just one of many shows out there putting forth that idea. So, you know, as I'm going through all this stuff and the question is popping in my head, look, are we going to trust science or the Bible?
46% of Americans believe the story of Genesis is true. So I just want...
It's amazing. It's astonishing.
I know, that the world was created in 6 days.
So are you urging people to give up on the idea of creationism?
Oh, yeah. Please.
The amazing thing is that every atom in your body came from a star that exploded. And the atoms in your left hand probably came from a different star than your right hand. It really is the most poetic thing I know about physics. You are all stardust. You couldn't be here if stars hadn't exploded, because the elements, the carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, iron, all the things that matter for evolution, weren't created at the beginning of time. They're created in the nuclear furnaces of stars, and the only way they can get into your body is if the stars were kind enough to explode. So forget Jesus. The stars died so that you could be here today, okay? And anyway.
By the end of the 1920s, astronomer Edwin Hubble, working with the large 100-inch telescope atop Mount Wilson outside Los Angeles, had established that our galaxy was only one of many galaxies in the universe.
When we look out at other galaxies, on average, they're moving away from us. And those that are twice as far away are moving twice as fast, and those that are 3 times as far away are moving 3 times as fast. And of course, that makes us look like we're the center of the universe.
Such a condition would imply that we occupy a unique position in the universe, analogous, in a sense, to the ancient conception of a central Earth. This hypothesis cannot be disproved, but it is unwelcome and would only be accepted as a last resort in order to save the phenomena. Therefore, we disregard this possibility. The unwelcome position of a favored location must be avoided at all costs. Such a favored position is intolerable.
Several decades ago, we found a problem so great that it was brushed under the carpet for many a decade. And this is the fact that galaxies spin too fast. In fact, 10 times too fast. By rights, the galaxy should fly apart. Therefore, scientists said that we have to have dark matter, a halo of matter that surrounds the galaxy and holds the galaxy together.
And what have they discovered? Absolutely nothing. Zilch. What is a little bit perturbing is that after 50 years we still haven't found what the dark matter is. But on the other hand, that doesn't mean they're not there, it just means they're harder to find than we thought.
We look out in the universe and 85% of all the gravity that's out there has some mysterious unknown source. We add up all the stars, the galaxies, the planets, the comets, the black holes, the dark clouds, everything out there that we can see, touch, smell, or taste. And it doesn't add up to give us the gravity that we see operating in this universe. So really we should be calling it the dark force, because we don't know if it's made of matter. It could be a profound misnomer, sending people off in thought directions that might not really be the right path. So dark matter is just simply what we call this thing about which we know nothing, responsible for 85% of the gravity of the cosmos. It is the longest standing unsolved problem in modern astrophysics. Dark matter, dark energy. Everything we know about the universe, what we're made of, galaxies, stars, planets, that's all right here. So, according to this chart, we are 96% stupid.
So the problem with cosmology is that we keep inventing theories, ad hoc theories, to try to explain the data, such as inflation, dark matter, dark energy, and so on, just to keep patching the theory up.
There is a crisis in cosmology. Usually in science, if we're off by a factor of 2 or a factor of 10, we call that horrible. We say something's wrong with the theory. We're off by a factor of 10. However, in cosmology, we're off by a factor of 10 to the 120. That is 1 with 120 zeros after it. This is the largest mismatch between theory and experiment in the history of science.
A very large number of universes, perhaps even an infinite number, could in principle exist in a vast hyperspace.
We can understand the idea of hyperspace by comparing it to a mug of beer.
The beer mug would be the hyperspace, and the bubbles would be these individual universes. The bubbles in a beer mug are all physically about the same. But suppose they span a range of properties. Some of them might have carbon and oxygen, and stars and gravity, and others don't. We would be in one of the ones that leads to a rich, complex universe culminating with life as we know it.
If there are an infinite number of other universes, the fine-tuning that seems to be present in ours isn't an example of God's plan, but rather the law of statistics. Most of these universes wouldn't naturally develop in ways that fostered intelligent life. But a few would.
So then the explanation for the specialness of the universe is that we are winners in a gigantic cosmic lottery. It stands to reason that we couldn't be living and discussing this in a universe that was hostile to life. Only the bio-friendly ones get populated with thinking beings. Having a multitude of universes is actually quite a simple and natural consequence of some of the most favored models for the birth and early evolution of our universe. It's kind of like stars and planets. As long as you have the capacity to make one, it's easy to make lots of them.
Oh, really? Wow! Beer mug hyperspace multi-bubble verse. Really?
Beer.
Seriously? They're farting out beer bubble universes. Okay? That's what they're doing. Hey, I got an idea. Yep. Multi-beer bubble universe. And they call that science. And they make fun of us? Really? Yeah, I'm not going to take that from them anymore. I'm not going to sit here and let people who think they came from monkeys out of a beer bubble universe ridicule me for looking into what I'm looking into and considering, a possibility. If you guys can think about beer bubble universes, then I can think about a snow globe. Fair enough? Okay, let's move on. That's what they believe, and much of that we have embraced, even in creation ministries. You know what? You don't have the intellectual high ground in this discussion if you believe that. I've had many people try to interview me, and I stopped doing interviews for the press because I know they're just going to take me out of context, look for that little snippet that they could try to make me look stupid with, put it with goofy music, put other people in there, and try to make fun of us. So whenever the news media has come up to me for an interview, I said, here's the deal. You don't have the right to use my image or anything I say unless we have the following conditions. If you're going to interview me, I get to record the entire conversation, the whole interview I'm going to record, and I get to interview you first. Because I'm going to interview them and find out what they believe. As soon as I realize that most of these people believe this stuff, they don't have the intellectual high ground in this discussion. They're going to have no room to try to make fun of me. You believe you came from an exploding dot and evolved out of a rock. And your smartest guys are telling you that we are off by 10 to the 120th power when it comes to our understanding of the cosmos. We are 96% stupid. And you're going to claim to be the intellectual high ground here? I don't think so. More and more scientists, mainstream scientists, where's my clicker? Are even beginning to acknowledge this also, not just creationists and flat earthers and stuff. You have Nikola Tesla, right? Back in his day, he said, today's scientists have substituted mathematics for experiments, and they wander off through equation after equation and eventually build a structure which has no relation to reality. He was already seeing where it was going in his day. About maybe 50 to 100 years or so before that, you had this guy here, Samuel Rowbotham, advocating for a more zetetic form of science, zetetic meaning investigation, proceeding with investigation and inquiry, doing tests. He said the whole system of Newtonian astronomy taken together constitutes a most monstrous absurdity. It is false in its foundation, irregular, unfair, and illogical in its details and in its conclusion, inconsistent and contradictory. Because the Newtonian theory is held to be true, they are led to reject the scriptures altogether, to ignore the worship and doubt and deny the existence of a creator and supreme ruler of the world. He went on to say that the scriptures were not intended to teach science truthfully is, in substance, to declare that God himself has stated and commissioned his prophets to teach things which are utterly false. That's some powerful statements right there. Mainstream, this is April of this year, April 30th. Article came out, mainstream scientists saying cosmology has some big problems as the field relies on a conceptual framework that has trouble accounting for new observations. Let me see if I can move forward in my notes here. He says, modern science is in serious need of a reboot. Compounding this problem, most observations of the universe occur experimentally and indirectly. Today's space telescopes provide no direct view of anything. They produce measurements through an interplay of theoretical predictions and pliable parameters in which the model is involved every step of the way. The framework literally frames the problem. It determines where and how to observe. And so, despite the advanced technologies and methods involved, the profound limitations to the endeavor also increase the risk of being led astray by the kind of assumptions that cannot be calculated. That's the individual there that said that. He went on to say, a key piece of the Big Bang paradigm was criticized by one of the theory's original proponents for having become indefensible as a scientific theory. Why? Because inflation theory relies on ad hoc contrivances to accommodate almost any data, and because its proposed physical field is not based on anything with empirical justification. This is probably because a crucial function of inflation is to bridge the transition from an unknowable Big Bang to a physics we can recognize today. So, is it science or a convenient invention? He concludes his article by admitting, quote, in order to maintain a mathematically unified theory valid for the entire universe, we must accept that 95% of our cosmos is furnished by completely unknown elements and forces for which we have no empirical evidence whatsoever. Mainstream scientist taking an honest look at his profession. I'm going to just distill that down into this right here. I say, what is taught today as fact is really nothing more than unproven ad hoc theories based on presupposition derived from outlandish conjecture, which itself was contrived from sheer fantasy, all of which ends up beautifully illustrated by the hands of artists and published in textbooks as self-evident truth.